Hey guys, I'm going to do a review slash recommendation of this next Canon lens that I have in my personal arsenal. This is the Canon 70-200 f4L lens. This is a Canon L lens with a zoom range of 70-200 with a constant aperture at f4. Now we're going to go over the body of this lens. This lens, as you can see, is Canon's famous white. Extremely famous white. Yes, so the Canon white lens, same white as the Canon 100-400 lens that we have in our yearbook arsenal. This lens has a few similar features, actually only one similar feature, which is its zoom, or its minimum focus distance selection. This lens has a 1.2 meter to infinity minimum focus option, or a 3 meter to infinity minimum focus option. As I explained in an earlier video, this just means that we can focus from 1.2 meters up close to infinity, or if we set it to 3 meters, we can take some quicker focus from this lens. Say we're shooting some farther away sports photography, this would be a more useful setting to acquire a quicker focus, as the camera doesn't have to consider less than 3 meters of focus. Now, this lens has a metal construction, as do all the white Canon sports lenses. This is considered a sports photography telephoto lens. This lens has internal focusing from 70 all the way to 200. 70-200 right there. It also has internal zooming, and it has internal focusing as well. This lens has a Canon ultrasonic motor driving its focus, making this an extremely fast focusing lens. Now, I noticed I borrowed the Sigma 70-200 f2.8 lenses a couple of times, and I noticed that their focus speed is very slow compared to the Canon. I think I'm just spoiled a little bit because Canon lenses have an extremely fast focus. Their ultrasonic motor lenses have very fast focuses compared to all the aftermarket lenses, and this lens especially is extremely fast at acquiring focus. I can go from infinity all the way back to the other end of the focus range extremely quick compared to the Sigma, which actually seem like a slug compared to this lens. Now, this lens, obviously, like all the other ones, autofocus, manual focus. It has autofocus, manual focus, override. So you don't actually need to turn to manual focus to use the autofocus ring, only if you really want a manual focus. It has a constant f4 aperture all throughout the zoom range, meaning that as you zoom in, your exposure settings will not change, which is another useful thing. Our Sigma lenses also have a constant f2.8 aperture, which is a little bit better than this Canon lens. But there's some pros to this Canon lens that just beat the Sigma lens, in my opinion. First of all, the build quality. This lens is all metal. Sigma lens is all plastic. This lens is cheaper than the Sigma lenses. Currently brand new, coming in at, there used to be Canon rebate. It came in under $700, around $600 something. I bought this lens for less than $550. I believe around $500. This lens is very light. It's much smaller compared to the Sigma lenses. Here's the 24-105 for comparison. The 24-105 is actually almost bigger than this lens. This lens has a smaller filter thread, so it's not as wide. And compared to the monstrous 100-400, this lens is a baby. It's also like about like a fourth of the weight. You can actually have this lens on and feel like you have a small lens on your camera, when in fact you have a large telephoto lens. This lens has a 67mm filter thread size, which is smaller than the Canon, than most of the filter threads that we have in the yearbook arsenal. But I also don't recommend using UV filters like a condom, because it's sort of unnecessary. Just, obviously be careful and take care of the front element of your lenses. Now, by this time, I've already reviewed like 3 lenses with constant apertures, and you might be wondering, how does that constant aperture work? Well, basically, I'll try to show you. See, there's a small hole right there for your aperture right there. I am zoomed all the way out to 70 millimeters. As you zoom in, that hole increases in size to compensate for the fact that you've been zooming in. Now it increases so steadily in size that as you zoom in, it allows the same amount of light in as when you were focused, or when you were at 70 millimeters as when you are at 200 millimeters. So the concept is, if you are shooting a photo at 200 millimeters with your aperture opened a little bit more than it is at 70 millimeters, you're actually going to get some better background blur and some better subject isolation than if you were shooting at 70 millimeters, which is a very good tactic to use if you are shooting subjects or sports. It's a good idea to shoot at the zoomed in all the way end, because you're going to get some better background blur and depth of field. Yeah. So, Burke, I recommend that in the future we get a couple of these lenses. Now, these lenses are not image stabilized, neither are the Sigma lenses, but these lenses are great for outdoor sports photography. All the powder puff photos are taken on this lens. I usually use this lens for actually all of the outdoor sports. This lens just dominates. The only drawback to this lens is the fact that if you're going to be taking night photography or indoor sports, it's going to fall behind the 2.8 aperture lenses, because that full stop of light is going to force you to bump up your ISO, and bumping up your ISO is going to lower your image quality. So that's really the only drawback to this lens. This lens is made for sports photography, and especially outdoor sports photography. Now, it may fill a niche market, but I actually think this lens will do better than the other lenses, and it's more of a usable lens. It's not as cumbersome as the other large lenses, and it's much less intimidating and equally as useful. So, Burke, I think we should get one or two of these lenses, and maybe even sell the Sigma lenses and buy like 3 of these, because these are quite good.